Restaurants are really under the gun with the minimum wage in Denver, too, and Boulder will be very tough, with landlords really increasing their rent, with food costs going up. And part of it is restaurants, we've gotten used to relatively inexpensive restaurants. When you think about a night's entertainment, if you're going to a play, how much are you paying for the tickets? If you go for a really nice meal, is it going to be the same? But you also see a lot of new restaurateurs in the suburbs doing better because they're paying less, both in rent and wages. And that's good for the suburbs because they needed some real food.
What were the highs and lows of 2024? We're going to ask Patty Calhoun, but first, please subscribe and like our channel. Click on that little bell icon for notifications and find the Devil's Advocate podcast on your favorite listening app. Do you even remember what year it is?
I think we're still in 2024, but it's been like the baton death march. We've got another month to go.
All right, let's just go through. I don't have a choreographed list of everything that happened this year. The big story was a long, drawn-out election. Was this the longest election in history?
No, I think that would be 2020, which still isn't over for some people. But a lot of those people have decided we'll surrender on 2020 because we got Trump in 2024.
Why Trump mattered in Colorado, I'm still trying to figure out. I think politically, one of the big stories is the GOP's collapse here, while throughout the nation, Republicans seem to be doing pretty well.
It's astonishing that the Colorado Republican Party, you cannot put a stake through Dave Williams' heart. It's just, if he has a heart, which we're not sure of. But the fact that he has done so many odd things to the Republican Party has stymied the possibility of having a more centrist, conservative, acceptable candidate. The kind we used to see in Colorado has stymied any of them from coming forward. He had an endorsement litmus test that even Donald Trump couldn't have passed. He had so many things going on. He ran himself in El Paso County for Congress and managed to endorse, well, I think he didn't endorse himself. He had other people endorse him so that there was no conflict of interest. But
there was no conflict of interest of the GOP chairman running as he's doling out money to candidates, which he didn't do.
Right. But sending emails out from Republican headquarters, and still, he managed to keep his job through lawsuits, through upheaval from
Any favorite emails of his? I think mine would be the burn the gay pride flag. Because in a state that just removed the ban on gay marriage from the Constitution by a 66% vote or something, that is what welcomes people into your party.
That fight has been fought in Colorado. Really, we had to come back to it. There was no real impetus for that. As far as I could see, there was I don't think anyone was grooming his children. He could have just left it alone and continued on with the rest of his very strange fights. But to bring back the hate state really turned off so many people in his own party.
He's magic. Is he like Trump? Will he be elected again? Will he have his own reality show?
Reality show is the better chance. I ran into him that morning in Aurora before the Trump election, the Trump rally, which then, of course, preceded the election. And he looked very, very happy. He just had another new baby. He was up from Colorado Springs. The Republican Party was looking good in Colorado. He had all his people speaking, including himself.
Were you at the rally?
I went to the rally, yeah.
How was it?
It was fascinating. First of all, I went there the night before, the Gaylord, drank with a lot of MAGA people who were polite, fun to talk to. The next morning, the volunteers were great. Everyone was great, kind of until after 3 hours of waiting for Trump. He was stirring up the crowd, and people started looking at the media and not liking them a lot. When Trump was talking about pulling the license on CBS and should other media outlets be gone. And yeah, I had some not very friendly people next to me.
Any good interactions? Were you in the press area?
I was in the press area, and they were saying, your turn's coming. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. And then someone said, we're going to defund you. I'm like, okay, this isn't public television. Go ahead. We don't have any funds from the government.
Actually, one of the stories of this year is the funding for journalism from government and from private grants. That the model of local journalism is now being pushed by not-for-profit organizations, and I'll make the huge step, mostly pretty left-leaning organizations putting money into co-ops and other avenues for this.
That's not new, but it's newish for sure. I mean, the Colorado Media Project has been going now for what, 5 or 6 years.
Explain it.
So it is funded by foundations, the Colorado Media Project, and they have different projects. They are giving matching grants for membership campaigns by media outlets. They provide advice, and sometimes they even provide reporters. I mean, I think they've got Susan Green working for the Aurora Sentinel right now. But what's interesting to me is because we've always been funded by advertising, not by the government, not by foundations. You actually have more protection when you have a lot of different people paying in, the mom and pop shops. And we also do memberships now, but you're not at the mercy of foundations and maybe the agenda they want or what happens when that grant goes.
I don't know how you've kept Westword going in the age of paper media. It's been amazing. I remember it from college. It's still going strong. It still does incredible deep dives on local stories. I just don't know how you pay anybody.
Well, fortunately, we have a very smart business staff and sales staff, and they have proved from the beginning how you create value for a free paper or now free website, because we always want to be free. And our paper is, no question, is smaller, but we do 100 stories a week online.
What would happen if cannabis and mushrooms were illegal? Would Westword go out of business?
We would not go out of business, but I will say cannabis has definitely helped the print product because they're very retro. They like to buy print ads, unlike everyone else, it seems, in the world now. Partly coupons. Think about the old days when moms were cutting coupons for groceries. Cannabis likes coupons.
Cannabis likes coupons?
Cannabis likes coupons. They like to do deals. They like to have people run out, get their deal, and then come in the door. And part of it also was they didn't like going online because you would cross state lines and you would wind up in a state that was where you weren't legal. So it's actually easier for them to do a print product. A lot of that's changing now.
Oh, so much I don't know about your drug culture.
Yes. It's very lively back there in the back pages of Westword. Drugs, sex, and rock and roll.
So I'm trying to remember the beginning of 2024. And I can't for the life of me. I remember we got a new quarterback for the Denver Broncos, which has been kind of fun. I remember talk about a new Broncos stadium because, God forbid, this one's only 20 years old, so we've got to rip it up. And I don't remember anything else.
Well, you might remember that we had the 6 Coloradans who had sued to keep Donald Trump off the primary ballot.
That was a big story.
And the Colorado Supreme Court had upheld their concept, and then it was at the Supreme Court. So we spent a lot of January and February just waiting to see what the Supreme Court would do on that. So that was it. And the Supreme Court did come back with an answer, unlike, say, we don't know about the Broncos
Stadium. And it was
Stadium.
unanimous, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it was a narrow decision. I mean, it was a narrow interpretation. It wasn't the whole thing, whether or not Donald Trump was culpable
not
on January
at all,
6th. None of that entered into it.
It was such a ridiculous suit. It was such a ridiculous thing for the Colorado Supreme Court. One of the big stories of this year was the Colorado Supreme Court. Not only keeping anybody off the ballot, which is just plainly unconstitutional, but the sex scandals in the office, that Boatwright was there and part of the cover-up of sex scandals in the high courts, and it didn't affect his re-election, or I should say retention, at all. So inside lawyer circles, it was a bad, bad year for Colorado courts, and it should be. I don't think it changes a damn thing. It is still an insider, inbred. Nobody knows what goes on in those courts.
I know, and even though we passed, what was it, H, which will change things a little, it's not going to change up much. And it was amazing just to have the veil pulled off by some good reporters. I mean, David Magoya did a great job on getting us to know as much as we do know about the deals that were made just to keep people quiet.
Yeah, the Gazette reporting on this was really the only reporting on this. And you had payoffs, you had shakedown. This is why we don't want this in the whole system. But the retention system, I looked at it. Every single judge this year was retained. Every single one. Even the one judge that the review committee said did not meet the standards of staying a judge.
Was that in Larimer County or Gilpin County?
Yeah, I think it's Gilpin. And he still won. So what do? The High Court plays a role in choosing its successor. The High Court chooses the disciplinary counsel. The High Court plays a role in the investigation counsel for themselves. It's a fiefdom. It's not a good court.
And interestingly, I think voters understand that and they would like to see change. They just didn't have a chance to do a lot unless they voted no, as you had advised. But I don't think they were ready to do that. But I can tell you, our story on how you can find out more about the judges was, for a while, was the most read story of all the election stories because people couldn't find anything out. And we would have people say, why don't you do more investigation? Well, you know how long it takes to investigate each person. So I would have had to, I don't know, hire 100 reporters to go after each judge.
And you can't evaluate judges except on these things. Is he nice in court? Does he show up on time? Does he give the ruling in a timely manner? But if you want to get to how does he rule, what is his philosophy, it's not like the legislature where all 100 of them vote on the same damn thing so you can compare. How did you vote on this bill? How did he vote? But they all get different cases.
Right, so you would have to find legal experts who would help you on it, be on the nice, and then figure it out because most journalists are not legal experts.
Getting information, transparency is still a story in Colorado. Complete Colorado had to sue, I'm trying to remember, the health department to get basic records and then to get our money back. You must deal with that all the time. I think the KORA laws, the open records laws and the open meetings laws are ridiculous.
And Colorado is better than some states, but it can be really expensive. Sometimes you can resort to other things like humiliating somebody on television, as we could do right now, that you can actually get some of the records more quickly, but they will stall, they will redact. It'll take you forever on some stories.
And in the biggest hubris I've seen on open meetings, the legislature exempts themselves from huge parts of the open meetings law, so we can't watch them doing our business.
That was one thing that actually did happen in 2024, and it was outrageous.
Did anybody support this other than the 100 legislators?
I don't believe so, and there were plenty of letters written to them, but it didn't make a difference.
And the governor signed it because he did a wonderful Pontius Pilate and said, well, they can create their own rules. You watch that. Mark my words, I think localities are going to try to do the same thing. We've got 5,000 governments, and if they can exempt themselves from open meetings, then we've got an old smoky back room again.
And on top of it, it's not, the media is so small now. There's so few reporters. You've got some citizen reporters who are doing their best, but if it is hard to get the information, if it's harder than, say, an open meeting, you're going to not hear things just because people can't get there. They can't get their leaks. They can't talk to enough people. It's a lot of work to go around and figure it out.
And never has it been cheaper to get the information because everything's digital. Can I get the emails? Yes, here they are. It's not that difficult. The city of Boulder, of all places, has an open, or at least they used to have an open email network for their to their elected officials. So everything that was written by and to elected officials, you could go and read.
How about texts? I mean, that's the other thing. They've gotten around some of it, but I don't know if they have in Boulder.
Have you ever had to sue?
For open records? Yeah, we have once or twice, but not that often. I mean, generally your bigger issue is you're going to be charged so much. I mean, huge, and then you've got to narrow it down and then hope you get your lawyer in to fight that too, so.
What was the biggest surprise of this election for you? Because this year, the story all revolves around Trump and elections. That was the story. The craziness from the GOP, it's just all part of the same circus.
It was politics across the board. I mean, because you also had the people who were still the election deniers for 2020, and that focused here because of Dominion. And then you had Griswold at the end with her own problem that still is not completely resolved. Jenna Griswold with the
Does that disqualify
open
her? I know
password.
she wants to be governor in 2 years. I don't see how that's going to happen if
She will not win with that on her
She will not
record,
win.
even if she decides to run. I mean, you also have Joe Neguse looking at it and Phil Weiser looking at it, but there's just no way with something like that. People noticed it. You have the Tina Peters, the outcome of that, which was
That
an
this year as
election
well.
clerk. Yeah, so sentenced to 9 years in October.
That seems harsh to me.
It did seem a little harsh. Now, partly I think it was what her attitude when she went before the judge, as you were saying, with the other judges. People generally don't like those who won't take responsibility for what they did, and Tina Peters didn't.
But at the same time, your sentence should be because of the crime. That you did this crime.
Well, she did do the crime. She didn't admit it was a mistake to do the crime.
Right. I loved that Jenna was one of the biggest critics of Tina Peters putting out that information when she herself put out the same information.
Now, the question is whether she did it inadvertently when Tina went in. She knew she was going in.
Right.
She knew she was breaking the rules. Jenna just
Was incompetence.
was incompetent, and then she didn't tell the county clerks, which was the really bad move for a week. To have to learn something from the Colorado Republican Party, a press release from Dave Williams about the fact that there are password problems, that is never a good way to go about
That
things.
is the failure of this. Not because somebody on her staff goofed up and an accident happened. Accidents happen. But to leave 65 county clerks with a you-know-what hanging out because they don't know until this happens. They can't take action. They can't answer questions. They don't even know that there's a security leak. And she was also keeping it from the press.
Right, because they didn't want a media storm.
Oh,
which of course,
how nice of them.
right before the election, they didn't want the media storm. So, but I thought that was the biggest botch of the year.
Makes you wonder what they get away with to make sure there's not a media storm.
Well, the good news is there are leakers out in the world, and Dave Williams was one in this case. So we did find that out.
So throw Jenna in jail, lock her up.
I don't think you can lock her. That's not a crime. For not being honest with the media, not a crime.
Not a crime. The election here was all Trump, all the time. The Trump derangement syndrome in Colorado is high. It's just high everywhere. But he did a little better this time.
A little better this time. I thought what was most interesting about Colorado voters were how they did with the measures, all the initiatives that were on the ballot that showed that when you remove the personalities of who they were voting for president, you saw they really considered all these different issues. And I thought did a pretty good job of deciding where they wanted to go with them.
Ranked choice voting surprised the hell out of me. I'm still
Oh, that it
surprised
lost?
that it lost.
Oh,
I thought it would.
I won money on that. I bet
Really?
It was complicated. And I think the primary issue, given everything Dave Williams had been doing, everyone liked the idea of changing the primaries. But the ranked choice part became too confusing for them.
Colorado likes incrementalism. This was too
Too much.
much. It'll come back. It's like Tabor. It will come back. The Colorado Republican Party, again, has this opportunity to remove itself from the primaries. So they can say, no, we don't want any primary, so we'll just do it through the caucus system. And therefore, if you want something to say, go to the caucuses, vote for your guy to go to the assembly, and that's it, which would alienate nearly 1 million Republicans and like 1.5 million unaffiliated.
So they'll probably do it.
And let me be the first to say, I hope they do it. I honestly hope they do it. This party is so messed up. It is so detached from political reality. There is no saving it until it burns itself out. Am I wrong?
Well, I don't see how it can be saved as long as Dave Williams is still there.
Why do you
And
say
I
that?
don't see him going anywhere. Magic bullet. I mean, he just manages to survive. And I don't know how.
Why is he bad for the party?
Well, I think he's bad for the party partly because he makes it a very private party. It is not a big tent for Republicans. It is his people.
But if only you're Trumpy enough, you could win Colorado because it was stolen. I've had it.
Oh,
I've had it
with him? With Dave Williams or
with
Colorado?
the whole thing. The whole thing. Burn it down. Let the party
Then
snuff
what
itself out.
replaces it?
I think a new, better party, number one. And two, I'll say it again. I think Colorado is going to become the first unaffiliated independent voter state. Half of our voters are now unaffiliated. The swing districts in those suburban areas, that decides the state. And with Trump, with abortion, with Dave Williams, a Republican running in those seats might as well just be a Nazi. You're not going to win. And I see more unaffiliateds going on the ballots and starting to win in those seats.
Well, it would be great to diminish the power of the parties, both parties, but clearly the Republican Party, because he's got a stranglehold on who's going to get on the primary ballot.
My frustration with Colorado's Republicans is the lack of reality. I get it. You're pro-life. I get it. You're anti-weed. I get it. You don't like gays marrying. I get it. I get that. You lost. On all of those issues, none of those things are going to change in the next decade or so in Colorado. What you need to vote for is somebody who's going to lower taxes and lower regulations and bring some sense to the criminal code here. But Republicans are so hung up on these social issues, which I get it. But they don't understand the rest of the state is no longer with them anyway, anyhow.
On those issues, but the rest of the state might go in on some of the criminal justice issues, on some of the fiscal issues. People might vote that way. You can see it even with the ballot measures, but they're not going to overturn the socially liberal, or I would say equality on giving people some choices and freedoms. They're not going to change that.
I remember, when was it? Late 90s that the state codified the ban on gay marriage, took it out of statute, and with a vote put it into the Constitution. That the people of Colorado voted that in by pretty serious numbers. And then just 20 years later, they pulled it out by even larger numbers. Proof the character of the state has changed.
And I think people in general have started discovering who their relatives are who might be gay, who their friends are who might be gay. They've realized that the world does not stop because you have a gay relative or a gay neighbor.
Biggest issue in 2024, the ongoing drama that is Casa Bonita.
True, and they just voted to unionize. You're like, can you get a reservation? Will you be able to get a reservation in 2025? We could have a contest to see, will the mall be finished before you get a reservation at Casa Bonita?
Have you tried?
Casa Bonita?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Have you gotten in?
I did go in, but I went in early on a friends and family dinner.
Ooh, how was it? Was it as bad as it was when we were kids?
Oh, no, the food was definitely better, and it
That's too bad.
smelled a lot better.
Oh,
That's
the whole experience.
Well, I don't think the smell was necessarily part of the experience.
It was. That's the magic of it.
I actually thought it looked pretty great. It looked like Casa Bonita before, but better and less smelly. Now, if you liked the smell...
No, I didn't like that, but it was the experience that stays with you for life. Then when you go into a Subway and get that wonderful stale urine aroma, you go, brings you back to your childhood. You have no romance, do you? You have no romance.
Not urine in my eating places. I don't need that.
You had a bad childhood. Poor Trey Parker, Matt Stone, who did this wonderful thing for us because they love Casa Bonita, because they got it. They're in now like, what, $40 million?
At least $40 million just to renovate the place because they had no idea what bad shape it was in. One of my favorites is like the divers had to go through this little tunnel that also happened to be where all the electrical wiring was. So the fact that no one was ever electrocuted is amazing. Then there were some other unusual health issues they found. So they fixed it, and then maybe that was $40 million. Now they still have to run it. And it's not a cheap place to run. I mean, they're charging a lot for those meals, but you've got all the different employees who are out there. They're still repairing things, and now they just had a union go
The unionization was really interesting. It wasn't the food workers.
It's the performers.
It's the performers. And so just like Disney, everybody is a performer, even if you sweep up the floor. So now they're with the theatrical union and I forget the other one. Yeah, but they're performers.
The tech workers, the performance tech workers, yeah.
Yeah. So the price is going to go up even more.
Well, they're going to have to figure it out. So the best intentions, and this was a very expensive good intentions.
Here's the lesson. Don't buy a restaurant, especially in Colorado.
A giant pink one.
Well, in Colorado, with the Family Leave Act, with energy prices, with minimum wage. I mean, up in Boulder, they're talking about a $25 an hour minimum wage. Small mom and pops can't survive.
Yeah, restaurants are really under the gun with the minimum wage in Denver, too, and Boulder will be very tough, with landlords really increasing their rent, with food costs going up. And part of it is restaurants, we've gotten used to relatively inexpensive restaurants. When you think about a night's entertainment, if you're going to a play, how much are you paying for the tickets? If you go for a really nice meal, is it going to be the same? But you also see a lot of new restaurateurs in the suburbs doing better because they're paying less, both in rent and wages. And that's good for the suburbs because they needed some real food.
Where do you guys eat at Westword? You're right there on Broadway, so...
We're on Lincoln, so we go to City O.
You go to Stoney's.
We go to Stoney's. The vegans go to City O City. Some of us just keep powering through and then go to the nearest Mexican restaurant.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. What was the biggest surprise in 2024 for Colorado?
Oh, that's a good one. I might not have an answer yet. Do you?
That Polis isn't going to run for president right away?
I don't think that's such a big surprise. Well,
I wouldn't be surprised to see him in 4 years.
No, I wouldn't be that surprised either. I will say, I think the fact that Dave Williams survived in the chairmanship of the Colorado Republican Party was my biggest surprise. I just think he would have gone. Because what's really in it for him to stay there? It's a thankless job. You're not going to win.
He's waiting for a Trump appointment. He's waiting for a real job.
And what would it be?
I haven't the slightest idea. Acting.
Maybe he can run Operation Aurora.
Yeah, the acting deputy director of janitorial services in some department. I don't know, but I think he wants a job. The media missed the Venezuelan thing. I think the media went way overboard saying everything's fine here. No, it's not a problem. No, it's not a problem. At the same time, Aurora is quietly arresting a bunch of Venezuelan gang members. Well, it's like, no, there's no Venezuelan gangs here. After the fact, coming to Colorado, everyone was like, why would Trump come to Colorado? It was brilliant because it underscored immigration.
It did, but let's also remember you can't ignore the fact that these buildings were run by slumlords who had been cited by Aurora since 2020, long before Venezuelans came. So the story was really multi-layered. Aurora didn't take responsibility as quickly as it should have. It should have been much clearer in the fact that we've got two problems. We have slumlords and we have a gang that's taken advantage of the situation.
As a friend of many slumlords, I take exception to that.
But are you a slumlord yourself?
Let's move on to other questions.
Okay.
It's in the eye of the beholder. Are they comfort animals or is it a rat infestation? It really depends on how you look at these things. And I sell it as a plus.
Well, what I would need to see, and again, we haven't looked at all this. We've looked at the files on these 3 apartment complexes owned by CBZ, but we haven't looked to see how many other citations they give to apartments in Aurora to see if this is an unusual number or if everyone's a slumlord. We don't know that.
What's the biggest difference? This is just out of left field, but what's the biggest difference in Denver from when you started Westword? I'm talking culturally. How has the city changed? I remember going down to UCD and you pick up Westword, and it was as thick as a phone book, and it was newsprint, and it seemed like a more fun town.
It was, in a lot of ways, more fun. So the media has changed, of course, hugely when you think about TV networks and how the local affiliates were so powerful, and the people who gave you your news, and they earned a lot of money, the big anchors, the local anchors. And now you see how TV viewership is way down. You see, we used to have the two big dailies, and now you've got the Post that's a shadow of itself. You have a lot more. You have to read a lot more different outlets to get as much news as you want. When you think about it, the entertainment complex was Glendale when we started Westword. That was where you went for fun. You didn't go downtown, so it's interesting. Downtown's gone through many different shifts. I mean, when we had our first office, it was in Lodo before it was named Lodo. Larimer Square was only for tourists. It wasn't a place that locals went. And that's changed. And Lodo, I think, will come. Downtown is coming back slowly. The mall has been a disaster for upper downtown.
The mall was a disaster the day it was unveiled. I mean, they had problems with their pretty little sidewalks and the road in the middle, and it never really kicked off. I know the downtown partnership loves it, but it never really worked as an anchor.
Now, do you remember the old 16th Street when you would drive up and down and there were movie theaters on it? It was like a Western town you see in a lot of places that still exist that way. But downtowns in general are in trouble. And I think Denver's is coming back. It's got a little slow because of your vacancy for offices.
The biggest difference I see in Colorado is in the people, in that it used to be you knew somebody out in rural areas. You had a family member who was a farmer or guys who live up in the mountains, and you kind of were in touch with at least that lifestyle. You don't have any guns, but your uncle has an arsenal out on the farm. And you kind of understood where your food comes from. You understood where the mining comes from. It all kind of worked together. Yeah, gypsum, I work up in the gypsum mine. No, I work up at one of the cobalt mines, whatever. Now that separation between suburban and rural is just a chasm. I don't think there's any respect for either one anymore. I think the other side looks at the city and go progressive crazies, and people in the city go, they're hicks out there. We need to put some wolves out there for them.
Well, the wolf issue is really one that defines how Colorado has changed. But you also have to think about what's happening. These mountain towns that are getting completely priced out because of skiing and because of second homes, and because during COVID, people bought those places, and now you can't afford to go work in the recreation industry and live in any decent way. And that's really tricky, that it's become recreation, at least at the ski areas, is so exclusive now. It used to be you could go and go pretty cheaply.
When Californians get tired, they always move to the pretty places, and then they ruin it. That's what's going on in Colorado. Even, you go down to Warfano County, and all the great land there is being bought up for McMansions that people can telecommute from. And I mean, who wouldn't if you had the money? But it changes the whole dynamic, and people can't afford to live here. Worse now than ever. And I don't see it getting better, even if you put grandma flats and densify everything, stack people on top of each other. Home prices are not coming down in Colorado in any substantial way.
And truly, those elite mountain towns, or the mountain towns that have the ski areas, are the worst, where any extra housing is going to be an Airbnb, a short-term rental, and people just cannot afford to live there at all. And I think that's going to be a huge problem as we go forward. How are you going to keep those industries going and have people be able to live there?
Let's do some predictions for 2025. You're pretty good at calling the surprises. What's the scandal du jour next year?
Oh, the scandal du jour. I think Mike Johnston is going to have some real challenges going forward, because he's going to have the budget he's got to figure out after we've spent, $75 million on migrant services. People are going to start, just when you see it, his affordable housing thing didn't go through, not because Coloradans or Denverites are not good-hearted people. They approved the Denver Health sales tax, but they're beginning to say this town is too expensive. Even the people who have their houses, they can't afford the property tax. They don't want to pay for trash removal. They don't want to pay to have the sidewalks fixed when they're already paying so much more. So I think there'll be some rebellion.
You missed the biggest problem that Mike Johnston's going to have, which is arming 50,000
Highland
mommies. You don't want to mess with them, he said in a wonderful pandering way. So this, if people don't know, this quote that he gave of, Trump comes here, we're going to put cops on the borders of the county. And who's inciting violence now? It's not Trump.
Well, and I don't really see why to conduct Operation Aurora, mass deportation, they even have to come to Denver unless they happen to want to go eat at Larimer Square. They don't have to. And if I don't know what the Highland Mommies were going to do. And that's a good show of the Highland Mommies just went out to help the migrants. They weren't doing it because of politics. They weren't doing it to oppose Trump or anyone else. They're like, these are people in need. We want to help them. That wasn't a political move. That wasn't Tiananmen Square. And when Johnson, who has kind of rolled back from that quote, was saying it would be like Tiananmen Square, no, people in Denver, and I think people in Colorado, want to help people. And that's what those Highland Mommies did. It was not an act of defiance.
Colorado and Denver feels full. When you're spending $80 million on services for migrants and you can't get cops on the phone because they don't have the resources, people lose patience. Yes, it's fine to have migrants to this level, but to this level, no. And even those Highland Mommies are going to get tired of not getting core government services because all the money is going to either homeless or migrants.
Well, and he is cutting back a lot, but I think people are still, they're going to be driving down a road that feels more crowded, has more bike lanes, they can't get with no parking, and it has potholes. So I think people are going to be a lot less patient in 2025.
I wonder about deportations. I think Trump is more roar than bite when it comes to that. I don't think it's as easy as it sounds. Once they're coming in, I think it's hard to get them out. But I would love to see mass deportations from Civic Center Park and the cops there to stop them. I'm looking for that battle.
There are not a lot of people in Civic Center Park right now to deport, so that's part of it. I think when you look at it, Biden's had deportations. Trump had deportations before. Obama deported more than both of them. I think the same amount, those two presidents combined. So there will be some deportations. They'll get publicized a lot more than any of those did. But I do think Trump will make good on some of it, but how he'll go about it, I can't even imagine.
I think he's going to stop a lot of people from coming across the border in the first place. I don't think they realize how bad the economy was, how bad immigration was. And did you owe me an apology on something? No, it wasn't an apology. It was, I'm trying to remember. Oh, you were right.
I did say you were slightly right, maybe was what I was saying.
No, you said,
during
and
our
I quote,
argument.
And I said, you said, quote, John, again, you are right, and I am completely wrong. Thank you for this teachable moment. I remember those words.
Well, I don't quite remember those same words, but I do remember disagreeing with you election night when Peter Boyles was hosting a live radio show, and you were talking about the trans issue having been a big one in the vote. And I said I thought it was much more a sexism division. But now I agree that the trans issue did get some attention and a lot of money. What was it, 27 million? Might have been more, poured into advertising specifically about that issue in the very last days of the election. I think that advertising made a difference.
I think it's the Bud Light moment. I think Trump is the Bud Light vote. Bud Light, you got to vote anonymously at the supermarket. You can't do it at work. Here you got to vote for Trump anonymously. Same thing. All right, let's wrap it up. Give me the big story of 2025.
Well, I think the big story of staying in politics, it's going to be jockeying for who replaces Jared Polis. And that's really going to set the tone for Colorado going forward. It will not be anyone in the Republican Party who looks like they have a shot. And that's all Dave Williams' fault.
Does a Republican have a shot in 2 years?
Not currently, but I think an independent might actually have a chance, depending on who it is. When you think it was Owens was the last one who was elected, a Republican who was elected. But I think with 49, almost 50%, probably will be over 50%.
It'll be over 50%.
Unaffiliated by then. I think a Republican could have a chance. I think, but not with the current Republican Party. I think an independent could have a chance.
You want to announce your run now?
Pretty much no.
I think you'd be great.
Thanks, John. You run.
I've done my stint in
that's right, you have.
super high power politics.
Well, it's true, and I get enough death threats every day, so I might as well be in politics.
Thank you for doing this. It's always fun. I know this was a meandering conversation, but I enjoyed it.
But just tell everyone to go have a drink before the show.
That's not a bad idea. We got more whiskey here.
Perfect.
Thanks. If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.